Alright folks, so today we're going to be doing a quick PSA video. Recently I've been working on a bunch of PlayStation 3 Dualshock 3 controllers and I've come across a bunch of fakes. So I thought it might be interesting to take a look at an official OEM Sony controller and see what the fakes look like as well. So if you guys are out in the market for a PlayStation 3 Dualshock 3 controller, you'll be able to tell the difference between the originals and the fakes. So let's start off looking at each one individually and we'll see if there's any telltale signs that we can see just on the outside. Alright, so looking at this first one here, the analog sticks feel pretty good, nice and tight. Shoulder buttons feel exactly as they should, and fit and finish is good. Got the serial number on the back there, so that one looks pretty good. Second one, analog sticks feel a little bit mushy. The front face buttons feel good, but the shoulder buttons feel a little bit loose, looser than the other one at least. This one has serial number on the back as well, so looks pretty decent. And this third one, now, to be honest, the analog sticks feel kind of crappy. Face buttons feel okay, but the shoulder buttons there feel really tight for some reason. And then looking at the back of the controller, obviously you can see that the sticker looks a little bit different there. So that one's a little bit suspect. So let's flip these over real quick so you guys can see the back of the controllers, because obviously there were some differences in the stickers. And I will say that this is one of the telltale signs straight off the bat, because for some reason the knockoff manufacturers just can't seem to get Sony's serial number sticker correct. One other thing to look for, I did have a couple of controllers and the stickers looked great, but they were stuck on just slightly crooked. Okay, so cosmetically, all three controllers look pretty similar. So I think just looking at it's not really going to cut it as far as being able to tell which one is the official one and which ones are the fakes. So what we'll do is open them up and we'll take a look at the internals and see exactly what we're getting. Okay, so we'll go one by one, and obviously I know that this one here is the official controller, so we'll open that one up first so you can see what an official controller looks like inside. Now, one thing to be aware of is there were 4 or 5 different variations of the DualShock 3 during its life cycle, so when we open this one up it may not look exactly the same as the one you have, but when we're done looking at the other fake controllers, it should be pretty obvious as to whether you have an official one or not. So let's open this one up and take a look, see what we've got. So the process of opening up a DualShock 3 is super simple. If you've never done it before, there are 5 screws on the back, and then all you need to do is squeeze at the bottom of the controller right between the 2 analog sticks with a little bit of pressure, and then pry the controller shell open. Now the first thing you're going to see is the PCB there, that's the brains of the controller, and that's attached to the housing which holds the DualShock motors in place as well. You'll also see the battery there in a grey plastic shell, and that clips into the PCB itself. So a nice neat package. So let's put this one aside and we'll take a look at one of the others. Now, one of the biggest tells that I've come across when I've been working on these controllers is the type of screw which the fake controllers have. So I would say about 90% of the controllers that I've opened up that have been fake have all used these self-tapping type screws, as opposed to just a standard machine screw that Sony uses. So we'll hold this up here so you can take a quick look and see what the difference is. Obviously, as you can see, the self-tapping screw from the fake controller is a little bit longer and has a pointed end. Now, I have seen a couple of fake controllers that were using standard machine screws. Like I say, few and far between though. Now I'm just going to fast forward this real quick while I'm taking out the rest of these screws. And with all the screws out, the process to open the shell is exactly the same as the official controller, so just a little bit of pressure in between the DualShock sticks and the shell should pop right open. And the interesting thing about this controller is the L2 and R2 buttons came away with the back of the shell, which is not something that would happen on an official controller. Taking a look at the internals on this controller, you can see straight away that there is a huge difference from the original one. The PCB obviously looks completely different, and there is no cradle holding the DualShock motors. So let's move this battery real quick and we'll take a closer look at the PCB. And as you can see, this one has a bit of foam tape holding the battery in place. It's actually stuck to the PCB itself. And again, the PCB quality on this is not too hot. There's a nice piece of epoxy there covering one of the chips, something that Sony would definitely not do. So let's compare this one to the third controller. We'll pop this down real quick and get the third one open and see what we've got in there. So again, as I said before, this controller has the self-tapping screws. So almost a dead giveaway straight away. And then one thing I noticed with this controller, when I was unscrewing the screws, the shell itself was almost pushing itself apart, like it didn't want to be together, which is definitely not right. The Sony controllers, the fit and finish on them is very impressive. They all hold together really nicely, even without screws in, and you can actually use them without screws in there. I'm just going to do a quick fast forward once again while I take the rest of these screws out. Okay, so just opening this one up, straight away you can tell something's not quite right. The L2R2 buttons came away with the back of the shell again, and then looking at the battery, this one is absolutely terrible. Straight off the bat, you can see some epoxy over one of the chips. Again, something Sony's not going to do. The Dualshock motors, again, I just kind of pressed into the shell with some foam, and that battery is just tragic. So now we've got all three controllers open, let's just pause for a second and take a look at each one side by side. I'm sure you'll be able to see the obvious differences, and then we'll go ahead and pull the PCB boards out and take a look at each one individually. We'll start off with the official DualShock 3, and this is pretty straightforward to tear down. There's just one screw which goes through the main PCB and the DualShock housing into the front of the casing itself. So we'll just move this battery out of the way here and remove that screw. And then once that screw is removed, the PCB is actually loose, but there are two clips either side of the DualShock motors. So you just need to squeeze those real easy and pull up to release the main board. Okay, and there is the official main assembly for the DualShock 3. As you can see, this uses a conductive film on the front. That's what creates the circuit for the buttons. And you can see how the shoulder buttons are attached to the conductive film itself, not the main PCB. So flipping this over and taking a look at the back, obviously you can see the main PCB there. And again, this one has a battery pack which actually clips into the PCB itself. So the official controller is one nice, clean, neat package. Now let's move on to the second controller and see how this compares to the original. Now, straight away you can see that the PCB board is completely different. The battery pack in this one actually looks pretty good. A lot of the fake controllers that I've seen had heat shrink batteries. Clearly you can see that the battery was attached to the PCB board itself with some double-sided foam tape, and there's a chip there that is covered in epoxy, which clearly Sony's never going to do. The PCB is held in by just one screw, just like the original controller, so we'll take that out real quick and see if we can notice any other differences. Now, doing the teardown on this is very similar to the official PlayStation controller, but you will notice that the DualShock motors don't have any kind of cradle holding them in, so that is a major difference. That being said, the original DualShock 3s were a repurposing of the original 6-axis controllers, so if you have an older controller, you may see the DualShock motors just being screwed in, but they are held in with screws, not by foam tape like this controller. Okay, so looking at the conductive film that they've used here, this looks absolutely terrible. It works, it does work, but clearly it's not the same as the official PlayStation 3 controller there. And looking at the top down here, you can see that the conductive film is actually physically connected to the PCB, which is not the way that Sony does theirs. And then once again, you can see the DualShock motors floating free. So let's have a look at the third one and see what we've got there. This is the one with the terrible battery in it. I don't hold much hope that this is any good quality, so we'll see what we've got. And it looks like this one has the battery taped to the motherboard as well. Great work, and that was stuck on there really, really nicely. So now we've finally got the battery off. Obviously you can see the PCB board there is probably worse quality than the other fake that we opened up. But again, not anything close to the quality that Sony would produce. So similar to the other controllers, the PCB is attached to the shell by just one screw, so we'll undo that real quick and see what delights this one holds for us. Now, quite unusually, this one actually has a different screw in the PCB board. Ordinarily, they just use the same screws throughout the controller, but this one was a little bit different. And then also, while I was trying to get this apart, the left side shoulder button assembly would not come out of the shell. So clearly the fit and finish is not as good as I would expect. So I actually ended up giving up on trying to get the PCB board out of this shell. And because the shoulder buttons are attached to the main board with wires, I can actually flip it over so you can see the front of the PCB. Now this one's quite unusual because it's not using a conductive film, it's actually just a PCB board itself. So that is a completely different design and obviously again something that Sony wouldn't do. And then again with this one, there is no cradle for the Dualshock motors. They're just floating free, just the same as the previous fake one we'd looked at. Overall, I'm going to say that the quality on this one is probably the worst that we've seen of the two fakes. So now we've got all three open, we can stop for just a second to take a quick look at all three together to see what the obvious differences are. And I'm actually going to try to pry that PCB out one more time, just so we can see the front of all three. So I did manage to get the PCB out after a little bit of fighting. So now we can actually take a look at the front of each of the PCBs side by side. And I'm pretty sure you'll agree there are some major differences between all three. And clearly neither of the fake controllers look anything like the official Sony controller. Now, the final thing we're going to take a look at is the front casings for each of the controllers. This is where the rubber contact pads live, and I wanted to see if there was any difference in those. Now, obviously, you can see, looking at the bottom left-hand corner, the controller there has white contact pads as opposed to clear on the other two. Sony is known to do both white and clear contact pads, so that's not too unusual. And as I was taking these off, you could tell by the quality of these, they're just not up to the standard of the Sony contact pads. So obviously what that means is there's more of a likelihood that they're going to wear out quicker. The only other thing I noticed, and this is the first time I'd actually noticed this, was on the back of the PlayStation button. The official controller has a grey finish, whereas on both of the fake controllers, the back of the PlayStation button is black. So that's just one last thing to look at that will tell you if you have a fake controller or not. So that's how to spot a fake PlayStation 3 DualShock 3 controller. I hope you found this video helpful and have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed making it. If you have, please drop us a like and consider subscribing. I really appreciate it, and it's really helping the channel grow. And also don't forget to check us out on Twitter. Thanks for watching.